Hello, my name is Zoe Vavrick. I am 19 years old and a college student in California, and I'm taking action for climate justice because I believe every person deserves to breathe clean air, drink clean water, and to have the people they love be healthy and safe. I learned about climate change in high school, actually, which I know not everyone has the opportunity to do so I was really lucky. But learning about all of the disastrous effects of climate change that we have already witnessed and expect to worsen really got me feeling like I needed to do my part in mitigating this crisis. So when my friend Rose told me about this program that she was running called the High School Green New Deal campaign with the Sunrise Movement, I felt like there couldn't have been a better time for me to step up and start being a leader, even though all of what I was learning about climate change made me feel really hopeless. So senior year of high school, I organized my peers from my high school and some others around us to persuade our county board of supervisors, as well as 2 other city councils, to pass symbolic resolutions calling on the federal government to enact the Green New Deal, which is a resolution that lays out the steps we need to take to mitigate climate change and provide millions of good jobs. And I'm going to be honest with you all, through this process, I had a lot of moments where I called my mentor, Rose, and I told her, hey, I don't feel like I'm the right person to be leading this. I don't feel like I have enough knowledge about my local government or even this crisis to have the confidence to make a presentation to my local representatives and ask them to take a stand with the power that they have. But of course, my amazing mentor, Rose, reminded me that my credibility comes from just being a young person growing up in a rapidly warming climate with politicians who refuse to take this crisis seriously. She reminded me that a good organizer is someone who just cares a lot, and everything will sort of fall into place if you lead with your passion. So that's why I continue to organize for climate justice with the Sunrise Movement today at my college, because I believe we need to continue to fight for a world where everyone can breathe clean air, drink clean water, and doesn't have to worry about the health and safety of the people that they love. Now I have the great pleasure of announcing our host for the day, STF Programs Manager Alvi Rashid, who will speak about the links between climate and gender justice.
Thanks, Zoe, for sharing your story and kicking off day 3 of our week of action. We can all learn from you and how to be more resilient in our activism. Can we send some clap emojis as we say goodbye to Zoe? I'm going to be clapping like this. So I'm Alvi. I'm the programs manager here at She's the First, and I think I can speak on behalf of all of my colleagues and say that there are core principles that guide our work, like making sure we're building an inclusive movement that centers girls' voices and expertise. Perhaps one of the biggest principles that guide our work is the understanding that gender inequality doesn't exist in a silo. All issues are interconnected, whether that's the refugee crisis, racism, or reproductive rights. This intersectional approach makes us stronger advocates in our fight to make sure all girls are educated, respected, and heard, because it allows us to recognize all the things that girls go through. That brings me to today's focus issue, climate change. In case you don't know this, climate change is a change in Earth's climate patterns due to increased use of fossil fuels. Basically, what that means is our planet is getting so much hotter, the ice glaciers are melting, and sea levels are rising at unprecedented rates. And it's all due to human activity like deforestation, overfarming, pollution, and overpopulation, and that's just to name a few. As we speak, droughts in the western United States are fueling historic wildfires that have burned over 100,000 acres of land, an area the size of the state of New Jersey. The smoke from these fires have traveled over 2,800 miles to the East Coast, where people are revving up for extreme hurricanes and tropical storms. That's 4,500 kilometers for those of you that use the metric system. Across the world, these extreme natural disasters are occurring more frequently and intensely than before. They also contribute to changes in agricultural patterns, resulting in food and water shortages. Perhaps the most unfair part of climate change is that low-income countries that contribute the least experience its effects the most. And even more unfair than that is the fact that girls disproportionately bear the burden of climate change. It causes people to lose their homes and livelihoods, putting them in major financial peril. Families have to make difficult decisions like which one of their children's education they are going to invest in. And sadly, we know that it's usually their daughter's education that is sacrificed. In an effort to ensure that their daughters are taken care of and that there's less financial hardship in the home, families can resort to child marriage as an answer. But we know the truth. Child marriage puts girls at even greater risk for financial insecurity, child labor, sexual and physical abuse, early pregnancy, and maternal death. Even if girls are in school, we know that as their parents are working more to make ends meet, girls take on more care work and housework. This means there's less time for their studies. As essential resources like water and firewood become harder to find due to climate change, girls spend more time looking for them instead of being at school. They'll need to travel farther to find them, putting them at risk of encountering violence and danger along the way. This is just the tip of the iceberg for how climate change radically affects girls. Luckily, all of us here are well equipped to mitigate the climate crisis. Experts like the Brookings Institute have done extensive research on solutions to climate change, and what they've found is that investing in girls' education plays a powerful role in climate action. For every additional year of schooling a girl receives on average, her country's resilience to climate disasters improves by 3.2 points on the ND Gain Index, which is basically an index that calculates a country's vulnerability to climate change in relation to its resilience. When girls are in school, they learn something called green skills, which help them care for and protect the planet and protect themselves. They also learn about climate change and how they can prepare for and navigate natural disasters. I came across a story of 7-year-old Lamia Akhtar in Bangladesh navigating a cyclone in 2007. That cyclone ended up killing 10,000 lives, but thanks to Lamia's education, she was able to prepare her family. At school, she had learned that a cyclone warning had been issued, and so she decided, because she understands how intense that's going to be for her community, to raise her alarm for her family and her community. She knew what to do when a cyclone happens and how to prepare for it. So she buried important papers and possessions. She marked them with a bamboo stick, and she helped guided livestock to higher ground. She was able to convince her family to go to the shelter, and everyone in Lamia's family survived because of her. We also know that women leaders are more likely to conserve and protect the environment. Countries with higher proportions of women in government are more likely to ratify environmental treaties, create protected lands, and have stricter climate change policies. Countries that have more gender equality have fewer carbon emissions and lower climate footprints. Education plays a key role in fostering girls' leadership skills so they're prepared to take up the mantle of mitigating climate change. It sparks their ambitions and empowers their voice. Girls with an education grow up to be powerful young women that can participate in government and climate decision-making conversations. By going to school, girls are actually experiencing their reproductive rights. There, they're more likely to learn about their bodies and how to take care of them. They're more likely to delay motherhood if they choose to be mothers at all, and if they do, they're more likely to have less children. This reduces carbon emissions and contributes to a healthy environment. Today, as we speak, young people around the world are walking out of school to protest against the lack of climate action from world leaders. There have been over 3,000 marches today. Let's take a few minutes to hear from the world's leading climate change activist, Greta Thunberg, as she addresses world leaders in the United Nations. Just wanted to let you know we're having a few technical difficulties with the video. Um, but to summarize, and we'll send it later in your action groups if we're not able to play it right now. But Greta Thunberg, an icon, is in the audience speaking to the biggest leaders in the world at the United Nations, and holding them accountable for taking more action. So each of us, just like Greta, have the power within us to fight for climate change by pushing systemic change and accountability from our governments, corporations, and world leaders. I have just been notified that we can try and play this video again, so let's go ahead and see if we can do it one more time.
It is that we'll be watching you. This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you? For more than 30 years, the science has been crystal clear. How dare you continue to look away and come here saying that you're doing enough when the politics and solutions needed are still nowhere in sight? You say you hear us and that you understand the urgency. But no matter how sad and angry I am, I do not want to believe that. Because if you really understood the situation and still kept on failing to act, then you would be evil, and that I refuse to believe. The popular idea of cutting our emissions in half in 10 years only gives us a 50% chance of staying below 1.5 degrees and the risk of setting off irreversible chain reactions beyond human control. 50% may be acceptable to you, but those numbers do not include tipping points, most feedback loops, additional warming hidden by toxic air pollution, or the aspects of equity and climate justice. They also rely on my generation sucking hundreds of billions of tons of your CO2 out of the air with technologies that barely exist. So a 50% risk is simply not acceptable to us, we who have to live with the consequences. To have a 67% chance of staying below a 1.5 degrees of global temperature rise, the best odds given by the IPCC, the world had 420 gigatons of CO2 left to emit back on January 1st, 2018. Today, that figure is already down to less than 350 gigatons. How dare you pretend that this can be solved with just business as usual and some technical solutions? With today's emissions levels, that remaining CO2 budget will be entirely gone within less than 8.5 years. There will not be any solutions or plans presented in line with these figures here today, because these numbers are too uncomfortable and you are still not mature enough to tell it like it is. You are failing us, but the young people are starting to understand your betrayal. The eyes of all future generations are upon you. And if you choose to fail us, I say we will never forgive you.
As you go about taking action for climate change by pushing for systemic change and accountability from your governments, corporations, and world leaders, I ask you to channel your inner Greta. At the same time, we each can make individual contributions. You can begin small by analyzing your own carbon footprint so you can reduce your contributions, or you can make a pledge to be more sustainable in your own life and school by creating a plan to eliminate plastic. You can even extend this to your chapter and share it with your community through a climate and gender justice event or rally. Use that chat box to let us know how you plan to take action so we can all be inspired by you. Now, speaking of inspiration, I'm excited to invite Maryam and Nivaal Rehman, two climate change activists and incredible storytellers, to join us.
Thank you so much for having us. Hi.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you here. Welcome to the Week of Action. All of us at She's the First are so proud of your work as journalists and as the co-founders of the World With MNR. So I'd love to get right into it. Tell us more about both of you and how you got started in this work.
Well, thank you so much for having us. We're very, very excited to be here. In terms of who we are, we're activists, journalists, and filmmakers. We're also students at the University of Toronto.
We're also the co-founders, as you mentioned, of the World With MNR, which is a nonprofit that uses activism, storytelling, development projects to really take action for climate justice, gender equality, and inclusivity. And we've been doing this work since we were 8 years old. We actually started in our home country of Pakistan.
And there was a girls' school there that our grandmother had donated the land to build, and we visited the school for the first time in grade 3, so when we were 8, and we learned from the girls that they were going to quit school when they reached grade 5 because poverty would have them work to support their families instead, and we resolved to fix that challenge, and ever since then we've been working there, and then also expanding our work here in Canada and around the world.
We've recognized that, there's, as you were mentioning earlier as well, there's an intersection between gender equality and climate justice issues. And particularly through our work with girls in Pakistan, we saw how, in that community, they weren't necessarily like the biggest polluters, or like they didn't even necessarily have the resources to be doing carbon emissions and things like that. But, there's countries like Canada or the United States where, there's some of the biggest emissions in the world. And people like the girls in our village had to pay the consequences of those actions, and really, the climate was impacting them, and there was global warming going on, and that was influencing their ability to go to school, especially in the warmer months as well. And so we really found that there was this intersection even with those girls in Pakistan there.
Thank you. Both of you mentioned that you're journalists and filmmakers. Why do you have such an important, heavy focus on storytelling? And then what role does that play in your activism?
Yeah, I think the reason why storytelling plays such a big role in our work is because we recognize the power of storytelling. Often, a lot of challenges have statistics and facts associated with them, but humans, we connect with each other's stories. We want to know how our experiences are, what things we've lived through. And so we've always sought to make the stories and the people that we work with amplified, because we want them to, well, we want our viewers and whoever's watching our work to recognize that they're more than just a statistic. There's actual people that experience these issues, and there's still people who are experiencing these challenges right around the world. And so we use filmmaking and we use storytelling to be able to make that difference and have that impact. And so filmmaking is one of those things, but also writing and all different photography, different sorts of mediums that we use to be able to make a difference.
One thing that I was really driven by in your story earlier is when you were sharing your own personal experiences. And I think that's something that we asked for our campus community to do as well, is that how do you relate to girls' rights? How do you experience them? And how are you going to braid that into your own advocacy for other girls and girls like yourself? So you've had the opportunity to use your voice and have it be heard by powerful people like Malala, and prime ministers around the world, including Justin Trudeau. So how have you used that platform? And the second part to that question is, what advice would you give to someone who's maybe talking to their school principal or a local representative about, how they're working towards climate action?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I think it's really, the opportunities that we've had are really incredible. And, we've been really privileged to have those chances to speak with world leaders and really highlight issues that we care about, whether that's climate justice or gender equality. And I think that when you are going out to meet with representatives or your principals or people in power who can really make those changes that you wish to be seeing, we think that it's important to understand your role and the importance of your message. There's so much that you can contribute to. So I think just recognizing the power of your voice and your stories is so important, and that will fuel you. I think that we can all get a little bit nervous when going out and really I guess breaking out of our comfort zones even to go out of our way to make these changes or advocate. But recognizing that your voice matters and that if not me, who? If not now, when? That's such a powerful quote that really drives us as well. And your voice does matter, and we're not just saying that in a cliche way. Like, we need everyone on board if we're going to be solving these really big challenges. And so I think recognizing that is such an important thing to do when you're going out and meeting with these individuals and really trying to make that change.
Thank you. And I just want to take a quick moment for those of you watching. There is going to be Q&A with Maryam Nivaal. So if you're thinking about questions, feel free to drop them in the comments and we'll get to them soon. So both of you are asking us to take action today by using your climate change toolkit. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we really feel is, associated with social media activism and the stuff that we do online, like it's really important to raise awareness and for us to raise our voices about issues that matter to us online. But it's also important to go beyond the post, as we titled our guide, and take action in addition to the stuff that we're posting online. And so these guides that we've started to create, this one in particular is focused on climate change, and it's all about activism, learning, and advocacy that you can be doing associated to the climate crisis. And so it gives you an overview of the challenge, but then also like books you can read, movies and videos you can watch to introduce yourself to the challenge, and then also actions you can be taking in terms of activism and then also advocacy, all related to climate change. And so it's not supposed to be an exhaustive list of everything you can be doing, but it's a really good place to start if you're confused, if you want more information on the climate crisis and where to begin, or if you're wanting to continue your work and just add on to the actions that you're taking. It's a really good place to go as a resource for you to be able to go beyond the post and take action. And most of these things are things that you can be doing right from home as well, because we understand and recognize that amid COVID-19, unfortunately, we're restricted to our homes and we can't really do that much in person, even though we encourage volunteering in person too when possible. But yeah, this is meant to be for our time right now and for youth and anyone who really wants to make an impact and create change for climate justice.
I've looked over the toolkit and it looks awesome. And I love that you have so many resources for people to get started with, right? Because I think we all are entering climate change in a different level. So we want to learn more before we advocate for it. So is there a book or a movie that you recommend for us to begin with?
Yeah, I think one of, we can hear a lot about the climate crisis and its impact on things like our environment. And once we learn about that, it's really like, it is really like heartbreaking and we want to do something, but we can't always see the connection between what we do and how those climate, disasters are taking place, for example. So one video that really shows the connection between all of this and our impact as consumers is the Story of Stuff project. They had this one video that really went viral on YouTube, and now they've started a whole YouTube channel about this topic as well. But it's just talking about how we as consumers, like, and the way the system is built, in the market or whatever, or like the way that we're purchasing things, it's all related to getting us to buy more and more without necessarily thinking about the consequences of that. And I guess on that point as well, there's another documentary which we added, which is The True Cost, and it talks about the fashion industry and the impact of the fashion industry and what we're purchasing and how fast fashion is really terrible for the planet. So those are two places where I feel like when you like watch those, like you can really understand the direct impact that your actions are having on the planet, and it's a great place to start when understanding like things that you can do right from home to make a difference and take action as well. And I think often when we're thinking about climate change and the climate movement, we think big problems or big issues like the carbon emissions that we create through our flights or our cars and things like that. That really makes a difference, and it does. But individual actions can make an impact too. And every time we buy something, we're basically putting in a vote to say that if it's a plastic product, for example, plastic water bottles, and the disposable ones, you just drink it once and you throw it out. Every time we purchase those, we're putting in our vote and saying yes to the company, make more of these because I'm interested in buying this. But if one person stops buying that case of water bottles, and other people in their community continue as well, and slowly you have this movement of everyone just not buying these water bottles anymore, the company is no longer going to produce them because there is no interest or they're not earning as much. And so I feel like we don't recognize that power that we have, that buying power as consumers, and we can make these small decisions and make those switches to reusable products or things that are much better for our environment, and that can make a difference at the end of the day too. And you don't have to be perfect. Sometimes people think they have to be completely zero waste in their lifestyle to be able to have an impact, but if we have 100 people doing zero waste lifestyles imperfectly than one person doing it perfectly, it can still make a difference. So I feel like that's also important to consider.
I love how you talk about taking action as something that's approachable, right? Like, where can we make the changes in our life um, to kind of leave a smaller footprint? Um, and as you were speaking, something that I was curious about, I know that everyone has this moment in their life where they realize how important climate change is and why they need to do something now. So I'd be curious, what was the moment for both of you?
Yeah, I think just growing up, we had a lot of our school, like, they were always just talking about the climate justice movement and actually on TV. So some of the shows that we watched were always sharing about, there was like songs about, you should turn off the lights and things like that. And so, there was interactive ways to get young people engaged, and it actually worked. So we knew right from the beginning that we had to do something about protecting our planet. And our parents always said as well, like we were maybe like even we were 6 or 7 years old in grade 1 or 2, and there was Earth Day going on, and everyone was closing their lights, and our parents like didn't know what was happening. So we told them like like because it was like the school day was different from like the actual Earth Day, and so they're like, wait guys, it's not even Earth Day yet, and we're like, no, it was today at school. And so we came home and like we would turn off all the lights and like play board games with our parents and like try to get them involved as well. And so we were always really engaged. And I think it was during those moments of learning at school, but also on TV and in the media that we consumed. It was a great thing that we had, but I think we also started to take more action in high school as well, getting involved with the David Suzuki Foundation over here. So it's been an ongoing journey as well. And I think what's been interesting is that like we've grown up knowing about climate change and the fact that this is an issue, and we thought it was a no-brainer that like, okay, we recognize this is an issue, that's why everyone at our school is taking action too. So it kind of went in reverse in middle school and high school when we learned that there's like climate change deniers and there's a whole movement
Yeah.
of people who don't even think it's a real issue. And that was really confusing for us because for as long as we could remember, we knew this is a challenge and here's what we can do to fix it, and we need everyone on board. And so we were always involved in school clubs and things to be able to make a difference. And I think we always thought of it as something that like it's you don't even have to think twice. Like we've messed up, or in the past like we've made decisions that are not okay for our planet, we need to make a difference, we need to stop it now. But we never even thought that that would be something that would be combating, like people who
Yeah.
don't even recognize that it's an issue when we had always known about it. So I feel like that has also been a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, I think raising awareness shockingly is still something that we're working on, right? As a community around advocating for why people need to change their behavior and hold their governments and corporations accountable. But one thing that both of you said that I think is amazing is that you led the charge in your own family and trying to change how you behave. For example, in my family, I also reduced the amount of water bottles that we bought, and we all have reusable water bottles that we use all the time. Um, which kind of leads me to my last question for you both before we open up to Q&A is what's one easy action our audience can take today for climate change?
Yeah, so we have a lot of actions that we recommended in our, Beyond the Post climate justice advocacy guide, but one that's super easy and one that we believe all of you should be taking, like, right away is switching your browser from Google to Ecosia. So I don't know if you guys already use it, but Ecosia essentially takes all the ad revenue. So whenever, like, someone sees an ad and stuff, they earn money off of that, and they use that money to plant trees around the world. And you can actually see how many trees your searches have planted, and it's a great tool to use, and it's such a simple change, but and it doesn't, I guess, take any, change of lifestyle on your part. It's just, your browser just changes and it's just as good as Google. But you're planting trees and contributing to a good cause like that. And so it's really amazing. And you can actually take Ecosia to your own school or change, to your school district. I think as clubs and stuff as well, or on different campuses, like at different universities. That's a great tool to be bringing to your universities as well, so that that becomes the standard browser in your universities and all the searches and contribute to planting trees. So that's a really great climate action that you can take really easily right now.
Oh, I'm definitely going to download that browser, Ecosia, right after this
Yeah,
to make sure that I'm doing things.
yeah,
So
awesome.
I have heard that there are a few questions in our chat box of things that people want to get to know about you. So the first question is, what are your top 3 suggestions for impact actions people can take in the area of climate change?
I think one of the first things that you can do is to be able to increase your knowledge around climate change. Just to start, like if you already know about it, that's great too. But just sometimes there's things that like we can't articulate. We know that climate change is a really big issue, but we're always reading, we're always watching movies and documentaries about the climate crisis, so that when we're advocating or when we're speaking to people, we're more knowledgeable and more equipped to be able to answer any questions that they have or concerns that they throw our way. So that's one of the things that you can start doing, increasing your knowledge and building your ability to be able to advocate for climate justice. And another, I guess, issue, like impact action that people can be taking as well is signing petitions. So I know that sometimes people believe that, petitions might not always be that impactful, but if a lot of people sign on to one petition, then it actually has the power to influence decisions because, again, it's similar to voting. Like the more people sign on to that as well, the more governments will see that, this is an issue that our public really cares about. And to stay in power, those individuals or those governments will try their best to address the things that the petitions are trying to get them to do. And so that's really important as well. And that's a simple action that you can be taking right from home. And then our final impact action that you can be taking is getting involved in local conservation efforts or different, local organizations that are working on this crisis. You don't necessarily always have to get involved with, multinational or international organizations to be able to make a difference. Different groups right at home who are doing shoreline cleanups, for example, or supporting the, local shelter for animals. Those are all really great ways that you can get involved.
Absolutely. So we have another question for both of you. Are there any stories you have found particularly powerful in highlighting the importance of climate change?
I think one of the most powerful stories that we've experienced firsthand has been the story of the girls in our village in Pakistan. That was one of the first times where we saw the international impact of climate change, and we knew that Pakistan has been disproportionately affected, or that poor countries in general have been disproportionately affected by climate change and the climate crisis. And so when we saw those girls experiencing in front of our eyes, like we would go in Pakistan, I think towards the beginning of the 2000s, the weather, it would get pretty hot and during the summer months, but it wasn't that bad or unbearable. And then eventually it came to a point where in 2010, or I think it was 2015 when we visited again, where we really saw the girls telling us like it gets so hot in the summer months that sometimes we just don't even go to school because it's just they walk to school, and that whole experience of them walking over even the long distance over is difficult. And so I mean, that was just like one small way that it was impacting, but just the weather overall was getting more and more extreme. And sometimes, like the monsoon season, the rains would get so heavy, it would flood their crops and just really impact them. And then we saw over here in Canada, like our weather was getting kind of like the winter would be longer, or it would be like different from what we were used to. But it was just I think the girls impacted us the most because we saw they weren't contributing that much to climate change. Their carbon footprint, like I don't even think some of their families have cars to be able to contribute in that way. But they saw that impact during the summer months when they were going to school, and it was a hindrance on their experiences and their learning. And so it was just really impactful for us, and we saw that connection between gender inequalities or gender equality and climate justice, and we knew we had to do something about both causes and connect them even more.
Thank you. So I want to highlight once again the power of personal storytelling, and because both of you had that experience when you were visiting Pakistan, and then also were able to relate it to your upbringing in Toronto and bringing it back to you. Even when I reflect on my growing up in New York City, I think about all of the public high school students that have to go to school still during really hot months without AC, and they're sitting there with classrooms with no ACs or windows. So understanding how it impacts you personally is so important to be sharing with others.
Absolutely. We totally agree with that. Yeah.
So I know we have a few more good questions that just came in. So Alice asks, how do you motivate each other to keep going? Or rather, do you have any tips on how to support fellow activists and members of your community?
I think for us, like we've always motivated each other to keep going by really highlighting like what are our goals. Like we're really like goal-oriented people, or like we have really big dreams and we're not afraid to dream big. And we use those dreams to really push us forward. And whether those are short term or long term, we feel like discussing them with people and saying your dreams out loud will. I think that's a really great way of making them seem more real and make it feel like you are actually going to make those dreams come true. And so we have big dreams for the girls in our village in Pakistan, and really the causes that we want to work towards. So whether that's climate justice or gender equality, and that process of really saying those dreams out loud motivates us to keep going and helps us plan out what we're going to be doing in that process of trying to achieve them. And tips on how to support fellow activists and members of our community. I think also like it's so important, especially as girls, for us to not look at each other as competition, but rather a community of girls who can uplift and support each other. Because once we work together, we're going to be able to make so much more of an impact, both in gender equality, but also in climate justice. And so, lift each other up, support each other, like let each other know what you need and, how you can support others as well. And really, go out of your way to support other girls and really lift them up. And that will be a really rewarding to you. And we have such a great community of girls activists that we know from around the world, and I think they keep us motivated as well. And I think you should all. I know that probably in your campus clubs and things like that as well, you have such a great community already. But as you continue to grow and build that community, you're going to be able to support each other even more.
And I think going off of the second question, which was about avoiding burnout and managing your time, I think it is a balance because you have school and you have all these other commitments, and then you're also an activist on top of it. And for us, it's always been, I feel like because we've been super involved in school ever since we were very young, we've been able to manage our time in that sense because we've grown with the workload and the experience of like managing our time along the way. But even if you're just getting started, I think the first thing to do is create a schedule and make sure you time out your like time out your schedule to the hour, which can seem like tedious, and you're like, oh my god, how am I going to do that?
Mhm.
But have a goal for each hour of your day, or if it's like a 30-minute session that you're doing for work, make sure to include breaks along the way. Those types of tips, we've been using that as we've started university this year, and it's really helped us. And it's coming from experience. We procrastinate too. We like to watch Netflix for too long sometimes, and that's all a part of the process. We're also students and young kids, right? And so, especially when we're experiencing those things, it's easy to get into that habit as well. But setting a schedule, scheduling in breaks as well, and making sure you set goals for yourself and achievable goals as well, you'll be able to manage your time along the way and be able to balance everything, and know that it's not going to be perfect. You're not going to get to do everything all at once, and then it takes time. And I think growing with it in that sense can also help you out as you're doing your activism work.
I love that response, and I want to add to it too is that you can take it a step further and even schedule in your self-care. So if you know that you're going to be hosting an event or a rally, and you know that you might be a little tired when you come home, or that you had to have some really difficult conversations with maybe some people who are climate deniers, um, find a way that gives you relief afterwards that you can look forward to, in addition to that feeling that you're doing something and you're taking action. So I +1 the scheduling tip. And I know that we're on to our final question. So Kay Austin asks, what would you change in the way organizations and governments regulate environment conditions?
I think maybe I'm understanding this correctly. So environment conditions, as in like the way we manage our pollution and things like that. So I'm gonna answer it that way. So basically, I think there needs to be a focus on ensuring that bigger corporations and people who are contributing the most are held the most accountable. And I think that's important because a lot of individuals like who come from families that are not, I guess, the most well off, or who might not have the same amount of resources as others might. They might not be able to afford the solar panels and electric powered cars just yet. So until those governments make sure that big corporations that are producing these products and things are making them more affordable for the everyday person, things are not going to change. And you can't put the pressure on the masses if you're not making those tools for them to cut down their carbon footprints accessible. And governments really need to recognize that that's an important step in achieving climate action and achieving different goals for reducing our carbon footprint. So I think first and foremost there needs to be a bigger emphasis on holding governments accountable, but also corporations accountable. And then we need to move towards making these opportunities accessible for the rest of the population as well. I also think that when we're focusing on our policies that are related to climate justice, and we're saying things like, it's really important to be able to protect our environment, but then there's like actions that are taking place that are going against that, or if you're continuing to invest in like oil companies, or you're continuing to not invest in renewable energy, I think that can be very detrimental to the climate movement as a whole. And so I think there needs to be some sort of mechanism whereby governments can be held accountable in that sense too. Like, yes, on one hand, you're saying you're investing in renewable energy and you're focusing on the climate crisis, but on the other hand, you're building a new pipeline. I think that doesn't go hand in hand, and it's really detrimental as well. And so those types of they're really like counterbalancing each other. Those types of policies cannot exist, and they're not helping. And so I feel like there needs to be a change in that as well, and the way that our governments and institutions are working to I feel like they recognize that the climate crisis is an issue, but they're still not willing to lose out on the short-term economic benefits, I would say, of like building a new pipeline, for example, or these new types of projects that rely on non-renewable energy. And so I feel like that's something that we really need to focus on as well. And the way we're going to achieve this is by getting these actions and these recommendations out through petitions, through advocacy efforts, calling in our representatives, and those types of actions as well.
I think one really cool component of this and holding governments accountable is that as girls and young women like yourself are growing up, you can enter positions of leadership in serving your communities, and you can say like, hey, like this is something that really matters to me. This is important for our environment and for our now and our future, because as I mentioned earlier, women are more likely to put in more environmental policies and stricter climate change policies, and that sort of thing. So I just want to take a second to thank you for your incredible advice over the last 20 minutes. You are incredible activists and so inspiring to the rest of us here. And I want to thank you for joining us and spending some time with us today. So
Thank
I'm
you so
gonna,
much for having us.
yeah, of course. I'm going to ask everyone who is in just watching, send your clap emojis as Maryam and Nivaal say goodbye to us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. And now I'm going to welcome Tammy Tibbetts back to tell us what to look forward to tomorrow.
Thanks, Alvi. It was a perfect segue talking about leadership. So tomorrow's rally will be hosted by my colleague, Kate Kiyama, she's the first director of programs, and she's also our first team member based in Nairobi, Kenya. We'll be talking about leadership and representation as it relates to the third right on the Global Girls Bill of Rights. As a reminder, the Girls Advisory Council, who drafted this bill last year, phrased this right as, all girls have the right to involvement in decision-making and pursuit of leadership positions without fear of discrimination, harassment, or persecution. Furthermore, they wrote that girls must be allowed to decide what our future holds and be able to lead just as much as boys in school, at home, or in the community. Any decision that affects us should include us in a position of authority. We have the right for our voices to be listened to and respected. Now, I'm really excited to tune into this tomorrow because this right is actually very meaningful to me and when I was a girl. So I just have a quick little story to share with you. It goes back to the story I shared during our kickoff on how I stumbled upon this North Star of wanting to empower girls. I told you how I was voted the most shy in my high school class, and that was when I decided, enough with this. I am going to go off to college and I am going to discover the power of my voice. Well, sure enough, I started freshman year at the College of New Jersey, and fall semester, I dared myself to run for office. I ran for freshman class secretary, and I was terrified. I had to get a petition and knock on the doors of the residence hall and have my peers sign the petition just to get on the ballot. And then I came up with a campaign slogan and I designed these flyers and then, got photocopies at the library and ended up stapling them on every bulletin board that I could find in the freshman dorms. And then on election day, I had to give a speech in front of, there must have been over 50 people. And I remember this like it was yesterday. Like I told you, I was terrified of public speaking, but I figured no one at this school knew my reputation as being the most shy. So it was a fresh start. And I gave this passionate speech about how I wanted to serve the freshman class and how organized I would be as secretary. I wore my best professional outfit, had my note cards, and did the best I possibly could. And then after me, my opponent went up, and she had a different approach. She wore a very casual outfit, a very short denim skirt, and a white tank top. And she had these colorful Post-its that she then stuck over her body while she was speaking to make the point of how organized that she was going to be. So then after our speeches, there was a break and they counted up the votes and I lost. Now, I can't say I'm proud of the judgment that I passed on my opponent's outfit that day, but in retrospect, I realized that she was absolutely the best person for the job. It was great that there was another girl who was representing, and she had so much confidence, and she knew her audience. She knew how to get her message across in a way that got their votes. So while that defeat might have been hard for a moment, ultimately, I proved to myself that I could get up in front of a bunch of people and I could be a leader. So, I was a journalism major anyway, and I would end up reporting on student government meetings. So it's probably best that I wasn't actually on the council. But I would later go on to hold other office in, clubs I was a part of. And I really think that that decision to just go for it and put myself out there in the vulnerable position to try to be elected was really meaningful. And now, fast forward 17 years, and I serve on the board of trustees of my school, the College of New Jersey. Last year, I was appointed by the governor of New Jersey to have this position, and I have a seat at the table now as a woman, the ear of the president, and I'm pulled into conversations all the time about how to make the campus more inclusive and diverse. And I'm the one at the table who's always asking about, what are the student activists thinking and how do we raise their voices up, which is an incredible amount of power. And it all started back when I was a student. So I think you're going to find tomorrow to be really inspiring. And maybe you're someone who thinks like, I could never run for office. And if that is you, I hope my story and what you're going to hear tomorrow urges you to reconsider and evaluate potential that maybe you didn't even realize that you have. Or it'll get you to realize who's a friend of mine who would be really great to run for office, and how can I support her campaign to have more girl leaders in your community, on your campus. You're going to have two amazing speakers. One is Adrienne Wright of I Will Not Be Quiet, which is an amazing activist group. I actually interviewed her on Wednesday on my Instagram if you want to check it out. But she is going to answer your questions and you're going to learn so much. And then you'll also hear from my friend Stephanie Kaplan-Lewis, who is a co-founder of Her Campus. And she is going to tell you firsthand about their new Elect Her initiative. This is an awesome training program to help those of you who want to run to get started now. So in closing, I just want to say that we're all so proud of what you're accomplishing this week. Please keep chatting in the WhatsApp groups and remember to tell us all about it by filling out your survey, and tell your group members to fill out these surveys. It's so important that collectively we measure our impact at the end of this week. It's a really important metric for She's the First to be able to share to the funders who make training experiences like this possible for students. So please do that. And thank you again for joining today. Thank you to our speakers, and let's keep going.